Handy then that we had a pretty epic Season 2 episode of House of the Dragon this week, which features monstrous face-offs, fires, and flights, balanced neatly with some quieter character moments as the tension continues to build toward the final. Queen Rhaenyra's search for new dragon riders continues with varying results. Queen Alicent takes a spa day, and Prince Daemon is still hanging out with Simon Russell Beale. We were stoked to be able to get on Zoom with cinematographer Vanja Cernjul, who worked on episodes 6 and 7 and got to shoot some of the season's most compelling action, like the mob scene that left Alicent traumatized and the unscripted kiss between Rhaenyra and Missari. This week, Cernjul helped craft the tense dragon pit sequence that gave us some of the most dramatic dragon imagery in the series so far. It was a masterful mix of special effects, tension and action. And let me say, I was terrified Ulf was going to get cooked the entire time. We asked this DP, who was recently Emmy-nominated for Jim Henson Idea Man, about planning for these episodes, the challenges of that episode 7 sequence, and what advice he has for cinematographers. No film school. I could probably talk to you just about the final sequences on episode 7 for 2 hours. But to start, what does your prep process look like? Vanja Cernjul. We had 5 teams of director, DP, and first AD, and I was the only DP who worked with 2 different directors. And with different directors, you work in a different way always, because different directors are different people. But I was really excited because the first director I worked with, and who actually brought me with him to House of the Dragon, we went to film school together a long time ago in the 90s. We met in film school, we worked on each other's student films, but haven't worked together since. And we always stayed in touch. But he had also an amazing career as a cinematographer. And then he started to direct a couple of years back, and was a very successful director very quickly. So I was really looking forward to working with him. And then the director of episode 207. I never met before. I met him in London when I arrived there. And it was really great to discover how similar tastes we had in classical cinema. And we really quickly developed our own vocabulary based on all the same films that we loved. There were 2 different directors, but a couple of things were very similar. And this was because House of the Dragon is such a massive, massive project, and it's also so diverse in terms of the locations. And you go in one episode from a huge set with 300 extras to dialogue scenes in a small room or to remote locations. So you have to adapt to each of these challenges and in a completely different way. So to get to some of the locations, we had to pare down this to really a skeleton crew. It was like a crew of 16 people, probably like a student film crew. And on the same project basically that maybe a couple of days before we would be shooting with a huge crew of more than 100 people. And also sometimes we were able to improvise and give more freedom to the actors and discover what the scene was going to be during the blocking rehearsal. Scenes that involved visual effects and dragons had to be planned really carefully. That part of the process was very interesting for me because I haven't done it in exactly that way before, because the ambition was really to make the visual effects this season the best that they can be and to make the dragons as real as possible. And with visual effects, they just take time. And it doesn't matter how much money you have. If you run out of time, you can't do justice to the work. And so in order for the visual effects to have as much time as possible, they had to know what we were planning to do ahead of time. So that process would go like I would meet with the director, and we would first shot list. We would come up with a shot list, and then based on the shot list, we would work with the storyboard artists to storyboard the scene, but storyboard the scene really precisely. We talked about angles that we wanted to achieve, and we tried to be as precise as possible with storyboards. Then once the storyboards were done and everybody was on the same page, then the visual effects department would take the storyboards and create previs animations based on storyboards. And here this was another level of precision where we would even commit to a certain lens. Of course, on the day, maybe sometimes it wouldn't be exactly that length, but we tried to give them as much information as possible how we would attempt to shoot it, because we already had seen the location at that time. So we knew what we wanted to do. And then a couple of times we would all look at the previs animation. They did an amazing job. These were little almost short films on their own. Even the characters looked exactly like the actors. It was amazing. We would go back and forth a couple of times before we would say this animation, this is what we really want to achieve. And of course, you have to try to be mindful because this process is very, very expensive. We wanted to go through the whole process when it was really necessary. But I think on each episode that I did, we did this for at least 2 or 3 scenes per episode and basically anything that involved dragons. And then on the day, we really tried our best to respect what we all agreed on and shoot exactly what they planned. Of course, sometimes things change and you can't do exactly the same thing, but we did our best. And our amazing visual effects supervisor, Dottie Einarsson, was with us all the time on location, even on location scouts, and it was really teamwork. So that was a process that I haven't really done before, and I really enjoyed it. It was a very well-produced project, so we were given enough time to go through this process. So I did these 2 episodes, but I was in London and Spain and Wales all together for I think almost 7 months. And this was because we needed that time to prep it. I had a decent amount of prep, but it was very busy every day. To jumpstart the process of storyboarding with both directors, we used, just to get us going, we used some scenes from classical cinema as inspiration. So, for example, for episode 206, when Adam is being chased by sea smoke, the dragon, his future dragon, we used the famous scene from North by Northwest, Hitchcock's masterpiece, where Cary Grant is being chased by the crop duster. We thought it was very similar because the plane is like a dragon and Cary Grant has no idea what's going on and what's happening with this plane. He just knows that his life might be in danger. So we thought, there's some parallels between these 2 scenes, and that's how we started. For the opening scene in 207 with director Lonnie Perister, Lonnie wanted to use a scene from Once Upon a Time in the West, the amazing Western from Cernjul, Leone. There was a famous duel scene between Charles Bronson and Henry Fonda. Long contemplative, when the 2 men are walking around each other, measuring each other up. Rhaenyra and Adam at that time, they are both with dragons. It's a very dangerous situation, and nobody's quite sure how this is going to go. So that was a fun way to start. And of course then once we saw the locations and once we talked about it, many times both scenes became something completely different. But that was a great way to approach this epic scene.